So let's replace this high pressure fuel pump on a high mileage BMW. Now, it's a good amount of work to get down into here, all right? As you guys can tell, I'm gonna skip the intro and all the BS and get right to it. Place is a mess, okay? So no comments about all this. We've got a lot going on right now. Didn't have time for this failure. But since we have it, we're going to try to record a video for you guys and give you some basic information on how to deal with this. I got all the torque specs right there. But before I give that all away, I want to give you guys some other pertinent information and some other parts that you should get if you're going to attempt this job on your own. Okay, one of those is going to be the high pressure fuel sensor. All right, there's the part number for that. This is a 2012 E70 with the N55 engine, by the way. Obviously, the intake manifold gaskets. I got a throttle body gasket here. I also have the gasket for the DME, which mounts to the intake manifold, which I'll show you shortly, and then the 6 regular intake manifold gaskets. So don't forget that stuff. You're going to want to clean out the intake manifold. It might be a little oily in there if it's high mileage. We also have this O-ring for the charge pipe where it connects to the throttle body because we've got an upgraded all-metal one to install, and we want to replace that O-ring as it's a common leak on these. We're also doing a set of spark plugs. I'll give you guys a part number on that right there. Take a screenshot. Okay, that's what we're using. Genuine oil filter kit. Always use genuine for this. And then we found this nice CNC aluminum oil filter cap. But what I would like to do is get a new factory cap and take out that insert in the middle there. And obviously this thing's going to need a little bit of cleaning inside, right? So we're going to put that whole valve assembly that goes in here new with the new filter kit. And we're going to do this oil change because the fuel pump failed. So sometimes what could happen is you can get fuel actually leaking out and ending up into the crankcase oil, which is bad all the way around, real bad. So we're going to do that, the spark plugs, the oil change. We're going to install this upgraded oil filter cap, and we're going to also install the new charge pipe that's metal. Other parts that we got, like I said, the fuel pressure sensor is going to be one of them. And then, geez, what was in this box? There was something else that I bought that was in here that I wanted to tell you guys about. But anyway, there's the part number. Oh, yeah, crankshaft sensor. Geez, how to forget that? The crankshaft sensor on these, they're down underneath the starter. And let me show you what I mean. It's in a real tough kind of spot. So you see the connector right there. Well, the sensor goes down underneath the starter inside there. And since it's a high mileage engine, we had the manifold off. I was looking around under here and I'm like, man, what else should we change while we're under here? All right. Be careful with this plastic line. You know, that clip, we tried to disconnect the clip and it just broke off in my hand. So we're going to have to order that plastic clip right there and replace that, you know. But it's good to know for you guys that you should at least get that, if not this whole line, and replace it. It just runs over to the brake booster, as you can see right there. Okay. And you're going to want to clean up everything down here, and you want to be real careful not to damage your oil pressure sensor. That's really important on these engines as well. You could replace that while you're under here. We're not going to replace it on this one because there's no oil inside the connector. We did, however, replace this one because there was oil in the connector. And just be real clean about it. One thing that I can tell you that I should have did that I didn't do, I didn't cap off here or cap off there, but I cleaned the area really nicely before I opened anything. So I blew off above the intake manifold and sprayed it out with a little brake cleaner and blew it out again, just to make sure when I pulled off the manifold, there wasn't a whole bunch of stuff falling in there. And then as you can see, I put the blue towels in there to protect it. One difficult thing was that bracket down there. Getting it to separate from the bottom of this whole pack of wiring. I just wanted everything out of my way so I can work on getting the fuel pump out of there without fighting the lines or anything. So I took the 2 screws out of that bracket, which I really didn't have to do. So you can probably avoid having to get these new aluminum screws for this little bracket right here if you can just wiggle it and pull it past these little tabs that are underneath. So that bracket goes down there on those 2 holes, and then that plastic piece with all the wires slides on and kind of clicks on right here. So if you can kind of wiggle up and down on that plastic piece and pull it off of here, you might be able to get away with just leaving these 2 screws in place and not having to replace them. But if you just want everything totally out of your way, you want to clean up down here and just do it all the way through, then get those 2 aluminum screws, and I'll give you the torque spec and the angle for tightening those back up as well. You're gonna need obviously torques, right? If you don't have those torques, forget working on these things. And other than that, nothing really special. As you can see, I left my ratchet down in there. I don't know if you guys could see it way in the back. Pardon my fingers in the camera view, but yeah, I used a 1/4 inch with an adapter to be able to get that starter bolt worked back out of there. And I just left it in there just because it'll be easier to help me like line things up and bolt it up going back in with the starter. The only reason the starter came out was, like I said already, the crankshaft sensor needed to be replaced. And underneath the manifold, that's about it. If you want to be really cautious, you can get this vacuum pipe, that clip, the 2 bolts for the bracket down here, and the oil pressure sensor. Knock sensors, I don't really see them going bad. This one had a little rub mark on it, so make sure that you secure that real nice when you're going back together, because that's right next to the fuel pipe as it comes out of the fuel pump and up the cylinder head into the fuel rail right here. Okay, cool. So I don't want to make this video too long, but how we got to this point was we took off all the air ducting, and I see a lot of guys opening up the air filter housing. If you don't have to service your air filter, you don't have to do that. You can just pop the whole thing off and then take off everything that goes above here. Now, there's this connection that goes from here. It's a PCV heater that goes down to the pipe that runs from your air filter, your induction pipe, down to the turbo. And the purpose of that heater is so that you don't get ice formations hitting the turbo and damaging it in cold climate. There's a recall on that on some models. On the smaller 3 Series, I know there's one for sure, and I think they're adding a fuse if I remember correctly. But that thing is always brittle. This one was recently replaced, so it wasn't too bad. I warmed it up with a heat gun a little bit. That helped me take that off. And also the pipe that runs right here and comes along down into here, the induction pipe, okay? Non-pressurized, just from the air filter down to the turbo, the induction pipe, where it separates from the short piece that contains the mass airflow sensor on the backside of it. That one is really tough to get off when it's cold, so just warm that up with a heat gun a little bit. It'll help you get that one out. And just move everything out of your way. I just moved everything out of the way, the wiring and everything. It just made it so much easier to do it this way, because I've done them before where I try to like weasel that pump out of there, and it's just not fun. This is just much easier to just move everything out of your way. Be prepared with the parts that you're gonna need. Learn from my failure here of not having everything that I needed and having to wait. Make sure that you're ready. And then the intake valves, they do have some carbon buildup on them. This thing has 190,000 miles on it, and it is actually due for the oil change. I thought it wasn't due, but it is due. So there's some carbon buildup. It's not as much as I thought there would be, but I pre-treated them with a little bit of this carb cleaner spray, and I'm just letting it kind of soak in. And then when I get ready to put the intake manifold back on, I'll try to clean them up a little bit. I don't have a walnut blaster or anything like that, so I can't do the full job, but I can help it a little bit. One thing I can tell you, though, from experience is that you don't want to scrape it up. So don't use anything that's going to scrape up the valves, because that's going to cause that carbon buildup to accumulate much faster. All right, so if you just want to knock down some of the major stuff real quick, it could work to pre-treat it. I wouldn't leave it overnight. just maybe a couple hours. And then, make sure that the valves for each cylinder that you're going to clean are closed. So you're going to have to pull off this crossbar right here and pull the fan out. And once you do that, you'll be able to get a big ratchet down there with, I believe it's a 22 millimeter socket, and you'll be able to bar the engine over. Now, only going in the direction of rotation. All right, so from left to right. So you're putting the timing chain slack up on the passenger side, or on the on the left side of the engine if you're facing the engine, okay? Because some of you might be in the UK, and if I say passenger side, you're thinking this side, so no. If you're facing the engine, on the left side of the engine is where you want the timing chain slack to go. So think about it, when you're turning the engine, right? You're pulling the timing chain down this side, that keeps this side tight, and you're feeding the slack up this side where the tensioner is, all right? So clockwise is the direction of rotation, clockwise. All right, do not turn it counterclockwise, because there's a very good possibility that you can cause your engine to jump timing. And that's not just a BMW thing. That's an all engines with timing chains thing, okay? So be careful about that. So rotating it over, making sure the valves are closed, and cleaning up that cylinder. Use a shop vac, use air, use whatever you got to do. Just kind of make sure it's clean in each port, and do the best you can to knock down some of that carbon in there. That's a good tip as well. So replacing extra things under the manifold, great tip. Getting all the new gaskets, another great tip. So you're prepared, okay? And there's a lot of plastic. There's a lot of things to disconnect. You just really got to be patient with this stuff, all right? Like, there was a little bit of difficulty involved here with, with the ECM connectors. But I want to show you guys, you have to push that little tab down and then push these forward, and that will pop these up. And it's a good idea to spray off around these connectors before you go removing them. The one that I had the most trouble with, though, was this one here. All right. And it's got a release tab on this side and on the other side. All right. I had to actually use some long needle nose pliers that I have that have a 90-degree angle on them. And I was able to wiggle it and take that one off. And then once I got them off, then I sprayed it all out to clean up the connectors with electrical contact cleaner spray. Once that was all done, then I was able to get all the connectors off of the ECM, and then proceed with removing the intake manifold with the ECM on it. I see a lot of guys trying to flip the manifold over to remove the ECM from it in the car. And I don't think that's worthwhile. I think you're better off just completely removing the ECM connectors in the car, so that you can just remove the manifold and the ECM altogether. So we'll show that here in a second. But before we get into that, I want to give you guys the torque specifications who came here just for that. I don't want to keep you guys waiting too long. I just wanted to give those tips, and then I'll show some more of the parts. And that'll be about it. I'm not going to go super in-depth with every part of doing this job. This video is just meant to be a high-level overview for someone who kind of knows what they're doing already, just needs a couple tips before they do the job, is, watching this from the shitter kind of thing, and can be more prepared for the job than we were. All right, so we got the fuel pump from BMW. I know, people are going to say, you could have probably got it cheaper elsewhere. It's true, but I wanted the most updated stock, and I didn't want to play around with getting parts from, some warehouse that's been sitting forever. So here's the old one where it belongs, in the garbage next to the Starbucks cups. There's a part number right there of the fuel pump that I got. Okay. And then I'll give you guys the torque specs. So on the starter itself, mounting it is going to be 38 Newton meter. And then on the leads, depending on the sizes of the leads, you have a 5 millimeter, a 6 millimeter, and an 8 millimeter. They're going to be respectively 5 Newton meter, 7 Newton meter, and 13 Newton meter. Okay, and then continuing down, all in Newton meter. Intake manifold is going to be 15. That's the nut or the bolt, any nuts or bolt, 15 Newton meter. Then the fuel pump, it says Continental or Bosch have two different torque specs. So Continental is going to be 9, Bosch is going to be 12. The injector lines, the ones that go from the rail to the injectors, just in case you're doing injectors. That's a spec that a lot of people may need. So that's going to be 23 Newton meters. Then the fuel pump line out and line in are both 30 Newton meter. And the sensor, high pressure sensor on the back of the rail, that one is going to be 30. And then the low pressure sensor, by two different companies, Sensata is going to be 20 and Bosch is going to be 30. This one does not have a low pressure sensor. If you do have a low pressure sensor, I'll show you where that's going to be here in a second. And the line bracket with the two screws that I talked about earlier that you don't really have to remove if you can wiggle that off and it's not in your way to back the fuel pump out of there or the line. That's going to be 5 Newton meter for the adjoining torque and then 90 degrees additional after that because it's an aluminum screw. All right. So let me just show you on the fuel line where your low pressure sensor would be, and I'll show you a couple more of the parts. Before I move on to the rest of that, let me go ahead and just show you guys this part number here. This I think you guys should get. All right, it says 1397 595 1. All right, so these have these stupid little squeeze connectors on here that are super brittle. This likes to rub, so we had put this there on a previous job to help protect it. But as you can see, they like to break, okay? So this is all the stuff that I removed. It's a pile of stuff because, like I said, I have a lot going on in the garage right now, and I don't have a bunch of room for this stuff. Usually I'd have some tables set up and have this stuff spread out, but this is the one I was saying that you should warm up when you're going to take it off. It'll help you get it free from the portion that contains the mass airflow sensor. This is the pipe being replaced with the all-metal one because this charge pipe likes to blow up, especially at higher mileage. So we're going to use some sensor cleaner and clean that one as well as the mass airflow sensor, which is down in here somewhere, right here, I believe. All right, so just be ready for it that this stuff could crack coming apart. So it's better if the engine is lightly warm when you start taking this stuff apart. But now that I've said that, I'm also going to give you guys a very good word of advice that I read in a N55 manual, and that is if the engine temperature is over, I want to say it was 104 degrees or 140 degrees, something like that, do not release the high pressure lines because the pressure inside of those lines is enough to do some damage to you. All right. High pressure fluid can penetrate the skin, and you don't want gasoline penetrating your skin like a needle and going up into your hand and into your arm. It's going to do serious damage. It's the same thing for hydraulic systems like, high pressure hydraulic systems on heavy equipment or anything like that. Hydraulics are very dangerous. This is not extreme pressure like those things are, but it's still good to know that if the engine is warm, there still may be enough pressure in that system to hurt you. So it's better to loosen it with a line wrench, not a regular wrench. Use a line wrench. And then to tighten it, you're going to need a line wrench crow's foot, which, let me see if I can show you guys that. If I have one here, bear with me for a second. Yeah, I got a set right here. And yes, they're Harbor Freight, but they do the trick. So this is a line wrench crow's foot. Let's see if we can get this thing open with one hand. Yeah. So if you use your torque wrench at a 90-degree angle, let's say this is my torque wrench. So if I put my torque wrench at a 90-degree angle and use it that way, it really doesn't affect the torque reading. But if you put it this way, the digital snap-on torque wrenches, they have a provision for that where you can add a measurement from the center of the fastener or the line to the center of the ratchet's head, right? So that distance, there's a calculation that it does, and it will adjust the torque for the additional leverage that you gain with this additional length. Although this is a small amount, it still does change the torque rating. So that's good to know that you have to set the additional head length, okay? Unless you use it in a 90-degree fashion, like I said, okay? So that's really good to know. All right, let me show you guys how the manifold and the ECM look. I've already cleaned out the oil that was in here. There was quite a bit of oil inside of the throttle body. More than likely, the turbo is leaking on this one. But there was also some thinner oil used in it than they should have. So we're going to go ahead and, like we said, do an oil change because of the fuel pump failure as well. Okay, I know I'm rambling a lot, but I hope you guys can get the information that I wanted to convey about what's under this manifold and what you should be prepared to do and what you should be prepared with when you get under there. All right, now if I can get the ECM. Okay, so this is what the ECM looks like. You obviously want to use some electrical contact cleaner, spray out the connections, and, you know, just drain them out by holding it upside down. I wouldn't blow a bunch of compressed air into there. You don't want to blow stuff into the ECM, right? And then clean up the surface where it mounts to the manifold, all right? So you have 2 screws that go in on the front side, and then these, you know, go in on the back. The rest of them go in on the back to hold it to the manifold, all right? And the rest of them are like this. They're sharp ones like this, okay? So that's good to know. And then I don't want to leave that there because one of the kids will come out, start interfering with stuff, knock it over, and I'll have to be real upset. So, okay, here's the manifold right here. This is the last O-ring to remove, and then we're going to go ahead and clean this all up. You don't want to put it back on with all that oily residue, okay? Obviously, over time, these things do allow some oil to pass through the turbocharger, and unfortunately, this is where it ends up, right? Also, our crankcase ventilation does a similar thing, so just be prepared for seeing that and then having to adjust for it, okay? I use that electrical cleaner. Whenever I service these vehicles, I like to vacuum out the power steering and add some fresh stuff in. I've noticed that it seems to help on the higher mileage ones with preventing leaks and stuff like that, so that's why you see that there. And then we got some of the oil right there waiting, all right? Another thing I like to do is I like to use this dielectric grease and just take a little bit on a cotton swab and then roll the tip of the cotton swab in your hand so that the lint doesn't stay in everything. Or if someone out there has like lint-free swabs and you know where to find them, shoot, post it in the comments, man, because I want to find some of those for sure. That's something that's been on my mind. Because what I use that for is inside of the electrical connection. So let's just use this Beamer Geeks adapter here, for example. And let's just say there was a seal that was a connector that was gonna plug into here that would have a seal, right? It looks like I got a bent pin. Look at that. That's not good. Anyway, what I'd like to do is use that swab and put a little bit of dielectric grease around inside so that when we plug things in to it, which I'll show you right here, like for instance, let's look at this one. This looks like the mass airflow sensor connector, possibly. But you see that seal right there? If we keep the integrity of that seal, it's going to last longer and it's going to be easier to disconnect next time. And it's just going to keep moisture out of these connectors. So I like to just put a very light, thin coating on these or in the socket itself. And then that way when you push it in, it just goes in so nice. And it stays put and it stays clean and you prevent corrosion. All right. So this video is way longer than I wanted it to be already. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. But you guys have the torque specifications. I'll show that one more time just so you know. And you have a general idea of what's underneath this manifold and everything that you have to remove to get in here and do this job properly. All right. Torque specifications coming right up one last time. If you guys want to screenshot that, here they are. Okay, and the most difficult part of this whole thing is just disconnecting those wires from the ECM, I would say, and then disconnecting the ducting on the top and taking all this stuff out. So, pardon the mess. Hope you guys got all the info out of it. Hopefully this will help you guys. And I'll throw in one more little thing, one more little tip that I heard is if these things are ticking, if these engines are ticking on cold start, I know that the N51 and N52 engines have a check valve system on the side of the head that you can remove those 2 check valves, and they're for the Vano system, and you can clean them out, and they have screens on them and a one-way valve inside. These N55s don't have that. It's integrated into the Vano solenoids themselves, have the one-way return valves in them. So if you're noticing ticking, a little bit of a rough idle, things like that, and you have higher mileage and you're looking for something to replace that you should replace just due to mileage that could help with those little things like rough idle and maybe ticking on cold start, something like that, try those Vano solenoids. I've cleaned them before and it does help, but you know, they have a spool valve in them, much like a transmission. And if you don't know what that is, check out one of my other videos on the transmission valve body servicing on the ZF transmissions, and you'll see what it is. There's spool valves that move back and forth in there, and these move pretty fast and pretty frequently to constantly adjust the oil pressure delivered to your variable timing system. So those do wear, and especially if the oil change interval is extended, like 10,000 miles, and people are running 12, 15,000 miles on the same oil. That's just ludicrous. Let's change our oil at 5,000 miles and prevent a bunch of this stuff from happening. Just another good tip for you guys to have. Anyway, thanks for watching. I wanted to keep it under 15 minutes, and now we're at 25 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Thanks for watching. Excuse the messy garage. See you guys next time, and good luck.